Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Nemo Shkedy with us. He's a startup GTM expert. He helps B2B founders turn your early sales into repeatable sales. He was a profitable founder at a YC startup called Apollo Shields Counter Drone Systems. He's in Tel Aviv. I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico. This spot is presented to you by podpire.com. If you want to scale, start, be invited to podcasts and monetize your podcast, go to podpire.com. Nemo, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Great. So basically, I'm originally like a proper hacker from Unit 8200, which is the Israeli NSA. Um, After about 10 years there, I started my career in startups in Tel Aviv, and I've worked at about five or six of them before I started my own company, Apollo Shield, where we raised $3 million from Y Combinator and other investors in Silicon Valley. And we built security equipment that detects and drives away unwanted drones. So we basically protected prisons and stadiums and public events, etc. Sold systems to law enforcement agencies, to militaries, and even to the World Cup in Qatar. About a year ago, I finished my role as a CEO of that company and transferred leadership to my co-founder. And since then, I've been focusing on helping founders go from early stage founders, go from the part, of the startup where they have a few sales and they're succeeding to the part where they can actually build something that is repeatable.
Very cool. So, first, what did you learn from your days as a hacker?
Well, I learned a lot. I learned to take things apart. I learned to really learn how different things operate, how to connect a variety of systems, and also, how to do research basically. And that's also a part of that's a big part of taking a startup from something that initially works sometimes through hustle and luck to something where where you're building a system and the system works. And why did the sale succeed with this customer and not with that customer? That's kind of something that I consider almost everything I do as like debugging a system and understanding what worked, what didn't, why things worked and why they didn't. Kind of being very so basically that's kind of the skill I learned as a hacker, to be a professional debugger, to find reasoning within a lot of different things that are initially unexplainable.
Right. Then, through the anti drone thing, uh, how has this proven useful since the Ukraine-Russia war and also Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, so that's actually a very relevant technology nowadays in modern warfare. Um, we've seen a lot of drones and counter drone systems being used in both wars. Um, I can't go too deep into that because my company has been involved with different activities, but it's naturally nothing I can talk about in a public podcast, unfortunately.
Right, not the company itself, but like how drones generally, like, are the drones used a lot nowadays
Oh yes,
in
yes.
this current warfare? And I mean, is it as easy as gunning down the drone with your technology and it's game over?
No, it's never game over. It's a game of. It's never game over. It's always a cat and mouse game with everything related to defense and security. So, whenever initially it is very easy for anyone to just buy a $500 drone, equip it with with explosives, and go ahead and do things. Where it gets kind of complicated is where where you have interference, where you have warfare around you, where you need to, this can be used to some effect in a in just one scenario. But if you want to use it systematically, you run into many different problems. Also, that's from the side of the attacker. From the side of the defender, um, a lot of the problems are because you can buy equipment and you can have technology to do a lot of things, but you can never protect everything. So there's always going to be a weak spot, and the challenge is always to manage the weak spots and to manage your basically like your defense inventory to cover the most places. That's from basically my experience.
Right. It's like total new warfare. It's quite interesting to study these phenomena, these new tactics, this new technology. Uh, Now, did you exit Apollo Shield, and why did you decided to start a growth agency?
So I'm not sure if I would call it an agency because I think that typically an agency does one thing or maybe a handful of things, and they do them particularly well. Um, the number one thing that I think I'm doing, besides the expertise in primarily in targeting and identifying ideal clients using a variety of tools, and also specializing in outbound, is that the process to the customer acquisition process and the go-to-market process in a startup is like it requires a lot of experimentation and evolution. So until you get to the point where something works, A to Z, I would say that if you consider how it works, it's like being a plumber, and you have to fix, you have to like open four different pipes, and the first pipe is just having enough conversations with people in your industry. And then once you have that, the second pipe you have to open is turning these conversations into enough, demo meetings with clients. And it's a different challenge, those two pipes. And then once you're finished with that, you still have another pipe to open, which is how do I turn all of these initial meetings into say trials? And when we turn them into trials, how do we turn all of these trials into closed won customers, or at least enough of them? And the challenge is that you might go through three of those pipes successfully, open three of those pipes successfully, and then get stuck in the fourth one. So you have to retrace your steps back to the step one or step two or step three, and that process requires time, determination, and a lot of hard work.
Right. So I'm seeing on your website you have these master classes as well. But what you're saying is that the way you do things is quite particular. It's not like most agencies, it's really case by case, like the app that you did and the fans could dance with Taylor Swift. So it's like these really odd thinking patterns. I think that you have a lot of questions on your website as well to filter out your clients and make sure that they're ready for you. Um, and you're fully focused on B2B startups, right? Are you talking about pre-seed, seed, or even Series A? What kind of startups do you usually work with?
Yeah, I'll try to explain this too. It's a good question you're asking. Is Let's consider, your typical B2B, I would say your typical B2B lead gen agency. They can build you the best performing outbound cold outreach campaign, but then maybe you get all the leads, and you can't convert them to the next step. Okay, so that's kind of a disappointment, and they specialize primarily in getting you more meetings. But then, what do you do when those meetings are not converting to the next step? Okay, then you don't have as much to do with the outbound agency anymore. You have to fix something in your internal process, or in the way that you do things, or in the way that you market and talk about your product, and then repeat this whole thing, right? So your typical B2B lead gen agencies aren't particularly good with, this experiment, conclusion, repetition. They can run a lot of different scenarios, but they might not be the best at adapting your entire strategy and your product strategy around what's the next experiment and what is my next hypothesis with the customers, right? So you have to do a lot of so of course my two areas of focus are content and outbound. Uh, and the thing that kind of distinguishes the way that I work from most of the agencies is that the work is designed to be repetitive. It's designed to be iterative. Whereas with agencies, they're mostly designed to do one thing and then just scale it up.
Right. And
Yeah.
what kind of startups do you typically work it with? Is it like a specific niche as well, or do you just accept everyone and you get insights and knowledge bits from all of them?
Yeah, good question. So they're mostly, I do work with some, it's about 80-20. 20% are unicorns, where I help them do AI-based outreach and other like clever targeting and scoring techniques, and hyper-personalized outreach. And 80% of my clients are startups, are early stage startups, in a seed stage, usually funded, pretty well funded, um, where the nature of the work with them is this iteration to crack the combination of like the right customers, the right message, the right medium to publish and to reach out to them.
Right.
And
And
one more to your question, also there are other parameters, for example, that I did find to be important, which is, for example, when you're doing outbound, uh, outbound is particularly successful with B2B, and where the customers are kind of democratized, where you have, thousands of different companies and people in your very immediate and actionable market, where even if you take, a subset of these clients who are right now ready to start and ready to, have your particular problem, you still have a lot of customers to work with. Whereas, for example, if you take some startups that are aimed specifically at, Fortune 500 companies, like some security startups are, then, this method would not be very successful, because that is that kind of startups require very relationship-driven approach, rather than more of, I would say, a transactional utilitarian approach.
right. And for the AI outreach that you do, tell us about some outreach campaigns that you launch with tools like Clay.
Yeah, so that's a great point. There is actually one campaign that I like very much because it was very successful. First of all, I think that the what Clay has allowed me to do, and that's, I think, the most important thing, is to find places where I don't just personalize, but I personalize with specific relevance. So let me give you one example. I was running this campaign for a company targeting M&A professionals. Um, and a tool like Clay really allowed me to figure out for each and every one of these professionals what is the particular domain in which this professional is, is looking to acquire companies. And then the suggestion would be based on that very specific information. So compared, and I was able, like, it was pretty easy also to compare the performance of this campaign to a campaign that didn't have this information, and it was almost 3x the success rate.
Right. And do you see any potential in basically trigger-based outreach or intros that would be quite particular that would interrupt patterns built with clay? For example, yeah, mentioning the commonalities between both of us or mentioning some shady information in a podcast that they mentioned at some point. What are examples of campaigns that you're launching nowadays?
This is interesting. One campaign that I'm particularly interested in, there are actually a few campaigns that I'm interested in launching soon. Um, and they are based, they're not built on Clay, actually. They're built on tools that I developed myself. Um, and they're going to be based on massive like analysis of the networks of people that around the people that you're interested in approaching. So this is kind of you need to do a more you need to do more advanced data mining on LinkedIn in order to find this kind of information. But I have seen some pretty successful campaigns that are based on the understanding of, you know, you're interacting a lot with content by this creator, and therefore you're probably interested in X, Y, and Z. And that's why, this is one kind of like trigger-based campaigns that I've seen that I think are pretty successful, because I do figure once you interact with a creator, if anyone mentions their name in an email, you're very likely to open that email.
What did you learn from your time at YC?
The I think that the most fun part at YC was being with other founders, was being with other people who are kind of in the same situation as you, who understand the same challenges, who are solving the same problems. Um, that was I think that was an experience that I liked very much. I think that as startups that aren't on YC, you don't get to experience that as um, in as much with as much engagement as you experience these founder to founder meetings, group meetings in YC.
Right. What about the mentorship? What important lessons did you learn from your time there?
Wow, I actually have a very good a very good point about that. I think that the mentorship um, at YC, it was it was very, I would say it was more high level. It was more like strategic than tactical. I think that's at least how I experienced it. But there was one really good tactical advice that I received at YC. And back then I wasn't as like, I was just an engineer, and that was my first time selling anything. Um, and we were just approaching demo day, and the reason and our entire goal was basically like to get one design partner out of our time in America, because we relocated there for 3 months from Israel. Um, and I remember that we were talking in the group about how do we get to this target. Uh, and as kind of a hacker, my idea was like, let's just reach out to more people, to more and more people. And I'd already built a few methods that were getting good responses from a lot of different security professionals and security leaders. Um, But what our group partner told us then is like, look, you have 2 weeks until demo day. If you reach out to someone today, you're not going to close them in 2 weeks. So this is now is the time to focus on your bottom of the funnel and just to do your best to close the deals that are already in your funnel. And that was kind of like the golden piece of advice when we were in a time crunch, and we were able to actually to get the Harris County Sheriff's Office in Houston, Texas, to install our system and to be a design partner just because of that one single piece of advice. And that's how we got to the demo day in with a good story and with a good client. And we were able to raise about $3 million after that.
Very cool. Where can people find out more about you, Nemo?
So I'm at Nemo Shkedy on LinkedIn or at impact11.com. That's my agency's name.